The warning sirens screamed across Defense Station Alpha as massive alien ships tore through space above New Sol Colony. Admiral Kyung-ho pressed his hands against the cold metal railing of the command bridge, his knuckles white as he watched. The nightmare unfold below. The Vorthak war fleet had appeared without warning. 50 massive dreadnoughts, each one the size of a city block, their dark hulls covered in glowing weapon ports. They moved like predators, circling wounded prey, positioning themselves in perfect formation around the human colony. "Admiral, incoming transmission from the lead ship," called out Communications Officer Hana, her voice shaking as she worked at her console. The young lieutenant had never seen real combat before today. None of them had. "Put it through," Kyung-ho ordered, though he already knew what he would hear. The alien voice that filled the bridge was cold and mechanical, speaking through universal translators. "Human colony designated New Sol. You have violated Vorthak territorial claims. Prepare for orbital cleansing. No survivors will be permitted. The transmission cut off immediately. No negotiation, no demands, no mercy." Kyung-ho felt his stomach drop as he looked at the tactical display. 3 million people lived on New Sol Colony below them. Families, children, elderly grandparents who had worked their whole lives to build new homes among the stars. The human defense fleet consisted of exactly 12 patrol ships and 1 aging destroyer. "Sir, colony shields are at full power," reported Tactical Officer Jin Woo from his station. "But our readings show those alien weapons they're unlike anything we've seen before." The first barrage came without ceremony. Brilliant beams of energy lanced down from the Vorthak ships, striking the colony's protective energy barriers. The shields that had protected New Sol from asteroids and solar storms for 20 years flickered like candles in a hurricane. Lieutenant Hana gasped as her communications board lit up with emergency signals. "Admiral, I'm getting distress calls from all over the colony. The Eastern Residential District, the shields there just failed completely." Through the observation windows, Kyung-ho watched in horror as streaks of alien fire began reaching the planet's surface. Where the beams struck, entire city blocks simply vanished. Not destroyed, not damaged, completely erased, leaving behind only glowing craters of molten rock. "Get me Captain Dong-jun on the destroyer," Kyung-ho barked. "All ships attack formation. We have to buy the colonists time to reach the evacuation centers." Even as he gave the order, Kyung-ho knew it was hopeless. Their weapons barely scratched the paint on those alien monsters, but they had to try. 3 million innocent people were counting on them. The human ships moved forward bravely, their small laser cannons firing desperately at the massive alien vessels. For a moment, Kyung-ho felt a spark of hope as their concentrated fire seemed to damage one of the smaller Vorthak ships. That hope died instantly as the alien fleet turned their attention to the human defenders. The destroyer vanished in a single blast. 3 patrol ships followed seconds later. The remaining human vessels scattered, trying to avoid the overwhelming firepower, but it was like mice trying to fight dragons. "Admiral, the main city's shields are failing." Hana's voice cracked with emotion. "The central district where the schools are, sir, there are children down there." Kyung-ho closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the reports of destruction flooding in through his earpiece. The agricultural sectors were gone. The industrial zones had been reduced to ash. The spaceport where families had been desperately trying to board evacuation ships was now a smoking crater. "Sir, we're receiving transmission requests from the surface," reported communications specialist Min Seo. "Thousands of them. People asking for help, asking when rescue is coming." "Cut the audio feeds," Kyung-ho ordered quietly. He couldn't bear to hear the voices of the dying, knowing there was nothing he could do to save them. The orbital bombardment continued for 3 more hours. The Vorthak ships worked methodically, like farmers harvesting a field. They targeted every population center, every building, every sign of human civilization. When they finished with the cities, they began glassing the forests and farmlands, ensuring that nothing could ever grow on New Sol again. Finally, as the planet below burned like a miniature sun, Admiral Kyung-ho made the hardest decision of his life. "Send an emergency transmission to Earth Command," he told Hana, his voice barely above a whisper. "Tell them New Sol Colony is lost. Tell them the Vorthak showed no mercy to civilians, and tell them—" He paused, watching the last of his patrol ships explode in silent fire. Tell them we held our position as long as we could. The message streaked across space toward Earth as the alien fleet prepared to jump away. Their work here was finished. What had once been a thriving human colony was now nothing but cooling rock and drifting ash. As the Vorthak ships vanished into hyperspace, they left behind only silence and the cold light of distant stars reflecting off debris fields where human dreams had once flourished. Admiral Kyung-ho stood alone on his damaged bridge, looking down at what remained of New Seoul. 3 million people had called this place home just 6 hours ago. Now there was nothing left but death and emptiness. The aliens had made their message clear. Humans were not welcome in this part of the galaxy, but what the Vorthak didn't understand was that they had just made the biggest mistake in their civilization's history. They had attacked innocent human families, and humanity never forgets. Captain Taemin stood in the briefing room of the UES Incheon, staring at the holographic map that showed the destruction spreading across human space like a deadly disease. Red markers indicated destroyed colonies, and there were far too many of them. "Show me the timeline again," he said to Commander Eugene, who was operating the display controls, with hands that shook slightly from exhaustion. None of them had slept properly in days. New Seoul was the first hit 8 days ago, Eugene began, her voice heavy with fatigue. Then Harmony Station, followed by the mining colonies on Kepler 442b. After that came the agricultural worlds of Green Valley, New Busan, and the research outpost on Titan's Edge. Each name on the list represented thousands of lives lost. Taemin had friends on some of those worlds. His cousin Ji-hoon had been working as an engineer on Harmony Station. Past tense now. Every attack follows the exact same pattern, Eugene continued, zooming in on tactical data. The Vorthak fleet appears without warning, usually during the colony's night cycle when most people are sleeping. They position their ships in orbit and begin systematic bombardment of all population centers. Lieutenant Wu Jin, the ship's intelligence officer, stepped forward with additional reports. "Sir, we've analyzed the attack patterns. These aliens don't seem interested in capturing territory or resources. They're not looting the colonies or establishing bases. They just destroy everything and leave." Taemin frowned as he studied the data. That doesn't make tactical sense. Why waste resources on complete destruction if you're not planning to use the territory? "We think it's a message," Commander Eugene replied grimly. "They're telling us to leave this entire sector of space. Every human settlement, every outpost, every research station, they want us gone." The holographic display shifted to show intelligence gathered from the few automated satellites that had survived the attacks. The Vorthak ships were massive, dark vessels that looked more like floating fortresses than traditional spacecraft. Their hulls were covered in weapon systems that human engineers had never seen before. "What do we know about the Vorthak themselves?" Taemin asked, though he suspected the answer wouldn't be encouraging. Specialist Hyun-A, their xenobiology expert, pulled up what little information they had gathered. "From intercepted communications and long-range scans, we know they're bipedal, roughly our size but more heavily built. Their technology appears to be several centuries ahead of ours in terms of weapons and defensive systems." She paused, looking uncomfortable. "Sir, there's something else. We've detected similar attack patterns in other sectors going back decades. The Vorthak have been doing this to other species for a long time. They call it territorial cleansing." "Other species?" Taemin felt a chill run down his spine. "What happened to them?" "As far as we can tell, they're all gone. The Vorthak have systematically eliminated at least 12 different civilizations over the past 50 years. Some tried to fight back, others attempted to negotiate. None of it mattered." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity wasn't facing an invasion or a war of conquest. They were facing extermination by a species that had already perfected the process on others. Commander Eugene activated another display showing current fleet positions. "Our entire Deep Space Navy consists of 47 ships, most of them exploratory vessels or cargo haulers with minimal weapons. The Vorthak fleet that hit New Seoul alone had 50 heavy battleships." "What about our allies?" asked Lieutenant Boram from the communications station. "The trade partnerships we've built with other species?" Most of them have already pulled back to their home systems, Eugene replied sadly. The Zentari Collective sent a message expressing their sympathy, but they're not willing to risk war with the Vorthak. The same goes for the Yandari Republic and the Free Traders Alliance. Taemin couldn't blame them. If the Vorthak had been systematically destroying entire civilizations for decades, it made sense for other species to avoid getting involved. But it left humanity completely alone. Sir, Intelligence Officer Sung Ho spoke up from his workstation. I'm receiving an urgent transmission from Earth Command. They're calling an emergency session of the Global Defense Council. What's the meeting about? Taemin asked, though he had a growing suspicion he already knew. Evacuation protocols, sir. They're discussing the possibility of abandoning all outer colonies and pulling everyone back to the Sol system. The words hit the room like a physical blow. Evacuation meant giving up everything humanity had built among the stars over the past 2 centuries. It meant abandoning the dreams of millions of colonists who had left Earth to build new lives on distant worlds. But what choice did they have? The casualty reports spoke for themselves. In just 1 week, 30 million humans had died in attacks they couldn't prevent or defend against. If the pattern continued, every human settlement beyond Earth would be destroyed within months. How many people are we talking about evacuating? Taemin asked quietly. Approximately 200 million humans living in outer colonies, Commander, Eugene replied. But sir, our transport capacity is nowhere near sufficient. Even if we used every available ship, civilian and military, it would take years to move that many people. Years we don't have, Taemin muttered, studying the tactical displays. The Vorthak were moving systematically through human space, destroying one colony after another. At their current pace, they would reach the core worlds within 6 months. Lieutenant Minji, their newest officer, raised her hand hesitantly. Sir, what if we tried to negotiate? Maybe if we offered to abandon certain sectors voluntarily, they might let some colonies survive. The older officers exchanged dark looks. Commander Eugene pulled up records from the destroyed civilizations. Others have tried that approach. The Kethmori offered to retreat to their homeworld if the Vorthak would spare their colonies. The Vorthak destroyed their homeworld first. Taemin felt the weight of command pressing down on him like a physical force. He was just one ship captain, but the decisions being made in the next few days would determine whether humanity survived as a spacefaring civilization or retreated back to Earth to wait for the inevitable. Prepare the ship for immediate departure to Earth, he ordered. We need to attend this council meeting and send a message to all remaining colony commanders. Tell them to begin emergency evacuation procedures, but to keep it quiet. We don't want to cause panic. As his crew began preparations for the journey home, Taemin stood alone with the tactical displays, watching the red markers of destroyed colonies blink like dying stars. Somewhere out there, the Vorthak fleet was moving toward their next target, confident in their overwhelming superiority. They had no idea that humanity was about to show them what desperation could accomplish. The emergency session of the Global Defense Council had been called at 3 in the morning, Geneva time. Representatives from every human world sat in the circular chamber, their faces pale and drawn from the devastating news that had been pouring in for days. The holographic displays surrounding them showed the grim reality. Colony after colony, marked in red, indicating complete destruction. Director Xiongwu walked slowly to the center of the chamber, his footsteps echoing in the unusual silence. For 40 years, he had served as head of the Department of Colonial Affairs, a quiet bureaucrat who managed supply chains and trade agreements. Today, however, he carried himself differently. There was something in his posture, in the way he moved, that made even the most senior military officers pay attention. Council members, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. I know you are all expecting me to present evacuation plans and discuss our surrender terms with the Vorthak. Admiral Yoon Hee, sitting in the front row, with her crisp military uniform covered in service ribbons, nodded grimly. Director, we appreciate your work in colonial logistics, but perhaps we should hear from Fleet Command first. We need to discuss our military options, limited as they may be. Xiongwu smiled, and something about that smile made several council members shift uncomfortably in their seats. Admiral, that's exactly what I'm here to discuss. But first I need to share something that has been classified at the highest levels for over a century. He activated his personal authorization codes, and the chamber's displays suddenly changed. Instead of showing destroyed colonies, they now displayed technical schematics, ship designs, and weapon systems that looked nothing like current human technology. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce you to Project Prometheus. The gasps that echoed through the chamber were audible. Even Admiral Yoon-hee leaned forward, her eyes widening as she studied the displays. Ships that looked like they belonged in science fiction movies, weapons that seemed impossible by current physics, defensive systems that defied everything they thought they knew about human capabilities. Representative Park Hyun-suk from the Mars colonies stood up, his voice shaking. Director, what exactly are we looking at here? The true extent of human technological development, Seung-woo replied, calmly. For the past 112 years, every human colony, every space station, every ship in our fleet has been operating under severe artificial limitations. He walked over to one of the displays, pointing at a sleek ship design that dwarfed anything in the current human fleet. This is the actual level of technology we achieved back in 2913. We've been deliberately holding ourselves back ever since. Admiral Yoon-hee stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. That's impossible. I've seen our research budgets, our development programs. Our technology develops at a steady, predictable pace based on available resources and scientific breakthroughs. What you've seen, Admiral, is carefully managed theater, Seung-woo explained. Every advancement you've witnessed, every new ship design, every weapon upgrade has been released according to a predetermined schedule. We've been conducting the greatest social experiment in human history. Representative Chen Min-jun from the outer colonies raised his hand, confusion clear on his face. Director, I don't understand. Why would we deliberately limit our own capabilities? Seung-woo activated another display, this one showing historical data about human expansion into space, because we needed to know if humanity could survive and thrive while appearing weak and non-threatening to other species. We needed to test whether we could build sustainable colonies, establish trade relationships, and expand peacefully without triggering aggressive responses from potential hostile aliens. The chamber erupted in confused voices as representatives tried to process this information. Director Kim Soo-young from Earth's industrial sector stood up, her voice cutting through the noise. Are you telling us that we've been living a lie for over a century? Not a lie, Seung-woo corrected. An experiment, and the results have been remarkable. Operating at just 10% of our actual capabilities, humanity has successfully colonized 247 worlds, established peaceful relationships with 16 alien species, and created the largest trade network in known space. Admiral Yoon-hee's military training kicked in as she began to understand the implications. Director, if what you're saying is true, then our current fleet capabilities are a tiny fraction of what we can actually deploy, Seung-woo finished. Every ship in our official fleet is essentially a training vessel operating with deliberately downgraded weapons, shields, and propulsion systems. He activated a new display showing massive shipyards hidden in remote asteroid fields and gas giant atmospheres. Our real fleet has been under construction for decades, waiting for the day when we might need to defend ourselves against a truly hostile alien species. Representative Lim Jae-sung from the research colonies stood up, his scientific mind racing. The energy requirements alone for what you're showing us would be enormous. How have you hidden this from our own scientists and engineers? Many of our brightest scientists and engineers have been part of Project Prometheus from the beginning, Seung-woo explained. Others have been working on projects they believe are theoretical research or long-term development programs. The compartmentalization has been absolute. General Wee Chan-ho, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. Director, this is all fascinating, but we have an immediate crisis. The Vorthak have already killed 30 million humans. Even if you have hidden fleets and advanced weapons, can they stop what's happening? Seung-woo's expression became deadly, serious. General, the Vorthak have just made the most catastrophic mistake in their species' history. They attacked human civilians without provocation, something we hoped would never happen but always prepared for. He activated the final display, showing real-time positions of ships that didn't appear on any official records. Hundreds of vessels, each larger and more advanced than anything the Vorthak had encountered, were moving silently through space toward the locations of recent attacks. The Vorthak believe they are facing a weak, technologically inferior species that can be easily eliminated, Seungwoo continued. They have no idea that they just declared war on a civilization that has been preparing for this exact scenario for over a century. Admiral Yeonhee stared at the displays, her military mind quickly calculating the implications of what she was seeing. Director, the firepower you're showing me, it's beyond anything in our current understanding of physics. That's because our current understanding has been deliberately limited, Seungwoo replied. We've made breakthroughs in energy manipulation, materials science and propulsion systems that won't be officially discovered for another 50 years. Representative Yu Da-hai from the agricultural colonies raised her hand tentatively. What about the colonies that have already been destroyed? Can this secret technology bring back the dead? The chamber fell silent at her question. Seungwoo's expression softened with genuine sadness. No, Representative Yu, we cannot undo the tragedy that has already occurred, but we can ensure it never happens again. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each council member. The Vorthak have spent decades perfecting their system of exterminating entire civilizations. They believe they are the apex predators of this galaxy. They are about to discover that they were wrong. As if on cue, alerts began flashing on the chamber's communication systems. Admiral Yeonhee quickly accessed the incoming messages, her face growing pale as she read. Director, she said quietly, I'm receiving reports of unknown human ships appearing in the sectors where Vorthak forces are operating. Ships that aren't on any of our fleet registers. Seungwoo nodded calmly. Admiral, I believe it's time for humanity to show the galaxy what we're truly capable of when someone threatens our families. Captain Il-sung of the Vorthak Third Fleet had been enjoying what his species called a cleansing operation in the human sector designated as Kepler 438. His fleet of 37 warships had just finished destroying another pathetic human colony, watching as their weak shields collapsed under standard bombardment patterns. The humans always died so easily. He was reviewing the tactical reports when his sensor officer, Sub-Commander Thekval, made a sound of confusion that was unusual for their disciplined bridge crew. Captain, I'm detecting an anomaly, Thekval reported, his multiple eyes focused intently on his displays. There appears to be a distortion in space directly ahead of our formation. Il-sung turned his attention to the main viewing screen, where the star field looked perfectly normal. Explain. This anomaly, Sub-Commander. Sir, our sensors are detecting mass and energy signatures, but visual confirmation shows empty space. It's as if something large is there, but we cannot see it. Before Il-sung could respond, space itself seemed to ripple like water, and suddenly, a ship materialized directly in front of his flagship. Not approaching from a distance, not emerging from hyperspace, but simply appearing as if it had been invisible moments before. The vessel was unlike anything in the Vorthak databases. Where their own ships were blocky and heavily armored, this human craft was sleek and angular, its hull seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. It was smaller than his flagship, but carried itself with a presence that made Il-sung's experienced warrior instincts whisper warnings. How did they get so close without being detected? Il-sung demanded, his voice carrying the edge that had made him feared throughout the fleet. Sir, our sensors still show no human ships in this sector, Tactical Officer Zenkar reported, confusion clear in his voice. According to our intelligence, the nearest human fleet is 3 systems away and consists of only cargo vessels and patrol craft. Il-sung studied the mysterious ship through the view screen. He had been fighting and destroying inferior species for over 20 years, and he had never seen anything like this. The human vessel just floated there, making no aggressive moves, but something about its very presence made his crew nervous. Open a communication channel, he ordered. Let's see what these pathetic humans want to say before they die. The main screen flickered, and suddenly a human face appeared. Il-sung had seen humans before, usually in the final moments before. Their colonies were destroyed, but this one was different. There was no fear in his eyes, no desperate pleading. Instead, there was something cold and calculating, that reminded Il-sung uncomfortably of his own reflection. "I am Captain Min-ho of the UES Soul's Fury," the human said in perfect Vorthak, his voice calm and steady. "You have 47 seconds to power down your weapons and prepare to surrender, before we demonstrate why attacking human civilians was the worst mistake your species has ever made." The bridge of Il-sung's flagship fell completely silent. Even the usual background hum of the ship's system seemed muted. Il-sung felt his jaw drop slightly before catching himself and restoring his commanding presence. 46 seconds, Captain Min-ho added helpfully, as if he were discussing the weather. Il-sung's shock quickly transformed into the kind of rage that had made him one of the most successful fleet commanders in Vorthak history. The audacity of this single human, speaking to him as if he were some minor threat to be dismissed, was beyond comprehension. "One ship?" Il-sung began to laugh, a harsh sound that filled his bridge. "One single human ship against my entire third fleet. You humans truly are even more stupid than our intelligence reports suggested." He gestured to his weapons officer. "Destroy that insignificant vessel immediately. Show them what happens when inferior species dare to threaten the Vorthak hegemony." 45 seconds, Captain Min-ho said patiently, completely ignoring the weapons now targeting his ship. "I should mention that this is the only warning you will receive. My government has authorized the complete removal of Vorthak forces from human space by any means necessary." "Fire all weapons," Il-sung roared, but before his weapons officer could execute the command, the human ship moved. Not the lumbering acceleration of normal spacecraft, but a fluid, instantaneous shift that seemed to bend the laws of physics. One moment it was directly ahead of them. The next it had somehow positioned itself at an angle that should have been impossible to achieve so quickly. "Impossible," Zenkar whispered from his tactical station. "Sir, they just performed a 90-degree turn without any detectable propulsion signature. Our sensors can't explain how they moved like that." 44 seconds, came Captain Min-ho's voice, still perfectly calm. Il-sung watched as strange energy patterns began forming along the hull of the human vessel. Unlike the crude plasma weapons of other species they had conquered, this energy seemed to pulse with a rhythm that was almost alive. "Captain," Subcommander Thekval called out urgently, "I'm detecting massive energy buildup from the human ship. The power levels are, sir, they're beyond anything in our experience." "One small ship cannot possibly threaten a Vorthak dreadnought," Il-sung declared, though he was beginning to feel the first stirrings of doubt. "Our shields have never been penetrated by any weapon system." 43 seconds, Captain Min-ho announced. "I'm curious, Captain Il-sung. In all your years of destroying defenseless colonies, did you ever wonder why humanity seemed so technologically inferior? Did it never occur to you that a species capable of interstellar travel might be hiding their true capabilities?" The question hit Il-sung like a physical blow. He had wondered about that, actually. The humans had achieved faster-than-light travel, built colonies across multiple star systems, and established trade networks with other species. Yet their weapons and defenses always seemed primitive compared to Vorthak technology. "It doesn't matter what tricks you're hiding," Il-sung replied, though his voice carried less certainty than before. "We have conquered dozens of species, some far more advanced than your kind initially appeared." 42 seconds, Captain Min-ho said. "Those other species weren't conducting a century-long experiment to see how well they could survive while deliberately limiting themselves to 10% of their actual military capabilities." The word sent a chill through Il-sung's entire crew. 10%? That would mean— "You're lying," Il-sung said, but even he could hear the uncertainty in his own voice. 41 seconds. "Captain Il-sung, I want you to understand something. Every human colony you've destroyed, every civilian you've killed, every family you've torn apart, they were all under our protection. They were all our people. And now you're going to learn what happens when you threaten a human's family." The energy patterns on the human ship suddenly intensified, creating a glow that was visible even through the filtered screens of the Vorthak bridge. Il-sung found himself staring at readings that made no sense according to everything he knew about physics and engineering. "Power levels are still climbing, sir," Thekval reported, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're generating energy equivalent to a small star." "40 seconds, Captain Minho announced. "Last chance, Captain. Surrender now or discover why the Vorthak hegemony is about to become a footnote in galactic history." Il Sung looked around. His bridge at his crew, all experienced warriors who had never shown fear in battle. Now they were staring at their instruments with expressions of growing terror as they realized they were facing something completely beyond their understanding. For the first time in his military career, Captain Il Sung began to wonder if he had made a terrible mistake. 39 seconds, came the calm human voice, and in the depths of space the soul's fury began to show the galaxy what humanity looked like when someone hurt their family. The morning sun cast long shadows across the rubble that had once been the proud capital city of Vorthak Prime. Where towering spires of black metal had reached toward the sky just 3 months ago, now only twisted wreckage remained. The great plaza where Vorthak emperors had received tribute from conquered worlds was now a crater, filled with the debris of fallen buildings. Former Admiral Il Sung knelt on the broken stones, his once pristine military uniform torn and stained. The insignia that had marked him as one of the most feared commanders in the Vorthak fleet had been stripped away, leaving behind only faded fabric where medals and rank markers had once gleamed. His hands, bound behind his back with restraints that looked deceptively simple but felt impossibly strong, trembled slightly as he waited. Around him, the ruins stretched as far as the eye could see. The Vorthak homeworld, which had never known defeat in over 2,000 years of galactic conquest, had fallen in exactly 72 hours. Not 72 days of brutal siege warfare, not 72 weeks of grinding attrition, but 72 hours of systematic dismantling by an enemy they had vastly underestimated. Director Seung Woo approached slowly, his footsteps echoing off the broken stones. He looked exactly the same as he had in that council chamber on Earth 3 months ago, a quiet, unassuming man who could have been anyone's grandfather. But Il Sung now knew better. This human carried the authority of a species that had just rewritten the balance of power in the galaxy. "Former Admiral Il Sung," Seung Woo said politely, stopping a few meters away. He held a simple tablet in his hands, scrolling through information with the casual air of someone reviewing grocery lists rather than the fate of entire civilizations. "Director Seung Woo," Il Sung replied, his voice hoarse from 3 months of captivity. The formal title felt strange on his tongue. 3 months ago, he would have laughed at the idea of showing respect to any human, let alone one who looked like a bureaucrat. "I've been reviewing the final reports from our military commanders," Seung Woo continued, tapping the tablet screen. "Your third fleet lasted 18 minutes against Captain Minho's single ship. The second fleet managed 23 minutes against Captain Jun Seo's task force. The home fleet, your most elite forces defending this very world, held out for 6 hours against our expeditionary group." Each number hit Il Sung like a physical blow. He had commanded the Third Fleet for 12 years, turning it into what he believed was an unstoppable force. 18 minutes. That was how long his life's work had survived against true human military power. "The humans who died in your attacks on our colonies," Seung Woo said, his tone remaining conversational. "They were farmers, teachers, children, playing in schoolyards, elderly grandparents tending gardens. They had no weapons, no military training, no way to defend themselves." Il Sung flinched at the words. During his long captivity, he had been forced to watch recordings of the colony attacks, seeing them from the perspective of the victims rather than the aggressor. The images of families running in terror, of children calling for parents who would never answer, had haunted his dreams. "And yet," Seung Woo continued, "your entire military machine, built over centuries of conquest and refined through the destruction of dozens of species, was completely overwhelmed in less than 3 days by forces we consider to be our training squadrons." The director sat down on a broken piece of masonry, making himself comfortable as if they were having a friendly chat in a park, rather than a discussion about the future of Il Sung's entire species. "Your people show promise," Seung Woo said, looking up from his tablet. "Your aggression is obvious, but it's tempered by genuine strategic thinking and an ability to adapt quickly to new situations. Most species that attack human civilians don't survive long enough for us to have this conversation." Il Sung felt a spark of something that might have been hope. "What do you mean?" "I'm offering your species a choice," Sheng Wu replied. "The first option is to join the Terran Protectorate as a junior member species. You would help us maintain peace in this galaxy and learn to channel your warrior instincts in more constructive directions." The words junior member species stung Ilsung's pride, but he had learned painful lessons about the cost of pride over the past 3 months. "And the second option? You continue down the path of conquest and expansion," Sheng Wu said simply. "You attempt to rebuild your military forces and resume attacking civilian populations." Ilsung waited for more explanation, but the director seemed to consider that sufficient. What would happen if we chose the second option? Sheng Wu's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes grew colder. The same thing that happened to the other species who made that choice: complete extinction within 48 hours. The casual way he said it made Ilsung's blood freeze. "Other species? 317 to be exact," Sheng Wu replied, consulting his tablet again. "Species that proved themselves to be permanent threats to civilian populations. The Krexhai Dominion was the most recent before you. They had been enslaving entire worlds for profit. After they refused our offer of rehabilitation, it took our Fourth Fleet 36 hours to ensure they would never threaten innocents again." Ilsung tried to process this information. 300 species, all more advanced than humanity had appeared to be, all eliminated when they proved to be incorrigible threats. How long has humanity been doing this? Actively policing the galaxy? "About 200 years, Sheng Wu replied. "We've found that most species, when offered the choice between cooperation and extinction, choose wisely. The Vorthak are unusual in that you managed to survive your first encounter with our forces." "Why?" Ilsung asked. "Why did you let us live when you destroyed so many others?" Sheng Wu stood up, brushing dust off his simple clothes. "Because your species showed something the others didn't. When Captain Minho destroyed your flagship, you didn't order suicidal attacks on human colonies in revenge. When our forces began dismantling your military infrastructure, you didn't resort to targeting civilian populations out of spite. You recognized when you were beaten and acted rationally." He paused, looking out over the ruined city. "Your species has the capacity to learn from mistakes. That's rare among aggressive civilizations." Ilsung felt tears running down his face, though he wasn't sure if they were from relief or shame. What would membership in this protectorate involve? "Your people would be relocated to worlds suitable for your needs, but away from shipping lanes and civilian populations," Sheng Wu explained. "You would be given productive work maintaining security in dangerous sectors of space, hunting down pirates and slave traders. Your warrior culture would be preserved, but redirected toward protecting the innocent rather than preying on them. And if we refuse?" Sheng Wu's tablet chimed softly. He glanced at it and nodded. "Captain Hyojin is currently in orbit with the 5th Fleet. She has orders to begin systematic elimination of all Vorthak military assets and population centers if you decline our offer. The process would be completed within 2 days." Ilsung looked around at the ruins of his homeworld's capital, thinking of the millions of Vorthak civilians who had survived the conquest and were now waiting to learn their fate. 3 months ago, he had been a proud admiral of a conquering fleet. Now he held the future of his entire species in his hands. "I accept," he said quietly. "On behalf of all surviving Vorthak, I accept membership in the Terran Protectorate." Sheng Wu smiled, and for the first time since this nightmare began, it seemed genuinely warm. "Excellent. Captain Donghyun will begin coordinating the relocation efforts immediately. I think you'll find that serving the cause of peace is far more rewarding than conquest ever was." As human ships appeared in the sky above the ruined capital, beginning the process of rebuilding a civilization in humanity's image, Ilsung realized that the galaxy had already changed forever. The age of predator species was ending, replaced by something new. An age where humanity's hidden strength ensured that the innocent would never again face extinction alone.